Hello there folks, this is Michael Maynard for Lockpickers United. Now, what we are going to do today folks is a tutorial on the mighty Lockwood, and in actual fact I'm going to treat this like a brain dump. I am going to dump an awful lot of information on you guys today and see if we can put together the definitive reference really on identifying and picking these locks and what makes them difficult. So they do have a secret, they do have a little quirk to them, and you need to learn what that quirk is and how to deal with it. So first thing we're going to do, we are going to talk about how to identify a Lockwood lock. Now there have broadly been three phases in Lockwood's history, and the first phase, believe it or not, is in America. So I know you guys may find this hard to believe, but Lockwood actually isn't a homegrown brand in Australia. It was started in the United States, and I'm going to put a picture of the old style Lockwood logo on the screen right here, because I don't actually own one of these vintage Lockwood American made ones. These are pre-war, these are from the 1930s, and if you have got one of these with that squirrely L shaped logo for Lockwood, particularly if you've got a key, you have got a beautiful, very rare and frankly very expensive lock. Those things are like hen's teeth. Now we're not talking about those today. Okay, what happened in the 1940s though was that the Lockwood brand was bought and the machinery was moved across to Australia by a company called Ogden Industries, and for the next 60 years Ogden made the sort of Lockwoods that we know and love. So this sort of stuff that you see here, and those are the ones we're going to be concentrating on today. Then in 1999 Assa Abloy bought half of Lockwood, and you'll see that these more recent locks, as well as having the oval Lockwood logo, so this is the logo that we know and love, but as well as having that, it's got the Assa Abloy name on it. And these locks, most of them anyway, in fact have different pins to these old ones from the mid-century. So this type here generally have 6 spools, so they don't have any standard pins in them at all. And you can usually tell when you've got one of these because you get an awful lot of play, an awful lot of slop in the core there. And so if you are looking at a modern one, it says Assa Abloy on it, and the core moves around a lot, then you have got a different kettle of fish to deal with. So we're not going to talk about that too much today either. What we are going to do though is concentrate on these beasts here. So all of these locks here have the same pins in them. They've all got the bevel pins that we're going to talk about in vast detail shortly. They've all got this oval logo. So this one happens to be another Assa Abloy one. But it does in fact have the old standard pins. Here is one from the middle of the century, so these brass padlocks were made literally unchanged for about 50 years. There must be literally hundreds of thousands of these things out there, if not millions. This round cylinder here, this is the standard domestic home cylinder on most homes in Australia and New Zealand. It's called the 201, the Lockwood 201. It is a 5-pin lock. And then this one here, the oval, this is Lockwood's standard commercial lock, and it's a 6-pin lock. But again, same pinning right throughout, so standard pins on all of these locks. The next thing to talk about is the keyway. And again, Lockwood basically used the same keyway for virtually every single lock they ever made, and it's called the C4 Keyway. It looks like that, and I think I'll just zoom in there so you guys can get a slightly better look at that. You will see this keyway on almost every Lockwood that you pick, and in fact, if you don't see this keyway, if you see something different, then that's actually a clue that there's going to be something different in here. So if, for example, you have something like one of the famous security keyways, so this is a thing called a JA keyway, If you've got one of the J series keyways, for example, you are almost certainly dealing with a master keyed system. So these are a little easier to pick, although the keyways obviously are a little bit more difficult. So these were the sort of so-called high security locks, and there wasn't really much high security about them really. They were just a slightly more difficult keyway, but the pinning almost invariably is all standard. Now there are one or two other oddballs as well. I'm sure you folks know that there's a thing called a Lockwood V7 and a Lockwood Twin. We are not talking about that stuff today either, folks. Those are outliers. The vast majority of the stuff that you're going to see is the C4 Keyway stuff. So same keyway for both the 5 and the 6 pin locks. And the question becomes really, how do you pick them? Well, what you need to do, you first of all need a very thick tension wrench. So this is the thickest commercially available top of the keyway wrench, 1.25 millimeters wide, that's 50 thousandths. And in actual fact, even that wobbles around a little bit in the keyway. In a perfect, you can see there's a bit of play there. In a perfect world, you'd actually want a tension wrench that was even slightly thicker than that to get the best out of the feedback. So the keyway is kind of deceptive, eh? Because it is so big and wide, you think it's going to be easy. But in actual fact, it's not. So once you've got your tension tool sorted out, you then need to figure out where you're going to pick it from and what tools you're going to use on it. Now, you will see that there is a very convenient ledge just here on the right hand side. Let's zoom in again on that. You pick from that ledge there. So it's not possible to pick from the bottom of the keyway with these things. You can't get onto the pins. What you need to do is pick from that ledge on the right hand side there. And that brings me to the picks that you're going to need for this. Again, it's really quite deceptive, folks. You'd think with a keyway that big and wide open that you'd be good just getting in there with a short hook, but in actual fact you need more than that. And everybody that picks these things uses at least 2 and usually 3 hooks to get into all the different bittings. Now, as I'm sure you folk know, for me, the Sparrow's Tron is my default short hook. This pick here goes into every lock, first time, every time. Doesn't matter whether I can get it in there or not. We try that first. So that for me is my default short hook. I then have a slightly steeper one, that's the Sparrow's Attila. And then for the really difficult bitting, I actually use the Lunatic as well. So we have got the Sparrow's Tron, Attila and Lunatic, all in 25 thousandths. You will not pick this lock with skinny hooks. They need to be 25 thou. Another really good option are the new hooks just recently designed by Tiffany for Lock tools. So I'm not familiar with the names of these yet. I know that the short hook is the Scimitar, so that's the Lock Tools Scimitar. And there are another 2 steeper hooks here, so a medium and a steep hook in the series that has been designed by Tiffany. This set picks Lockwoods really well as well. So doesn't really matter exactly which brand you use, okay, but definitely you need 25 thousandths picks, and definitely you need a short, medium and steep to take care of all the potential bittings. Right, now, having spoken about that at some length, folks, we now actually need to talk about the pinning and explain why it is as difficult as it is to pick these things. Now, I'm just going to get a pen and paper here, guys, and I'm going to draw you some pictures. Okay, folks. Well, listen. What I've told you so far is that the Lockwood locks have all standard pins, and they absolutely do. Apart from the new acid alloy stuff, Lockwood do not use security pins except with 1 or 2 very specific exceptions. So 99.9% of Lockwood pins are so-called standard pins. All right. Now, The thing about the Lockwood ones though is that they have got beveled top and bottom edges. So if we draw the top pins first, they look like that, and the key pins look exactly the same. Here's our key pin going down to a point. Now, why is that difficult, and why is that different, and why is it there in the first place? Well, first and foremost, let's talk about a standard, cheap, nasty pin, okay? The sort of thing that you get in a cheaply made Chinese lock. The edges are squared off, so they are simply quite literally one piece of round stock that has been sheared off at the end, and you have a very, very sharp edge. Now, everybody's picked those, and we all know how they pick. If you've got a 5-pin lock and it's got 5 of those in it, you get 5 clicks and the lock is open. Bang, 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 bang. There it is, done. Okay. Well, that's a very cheap one, okay? Now let's think about a very, very expensive one. And the best example I can give you, folks, are the ASSA pins, particularly the pins in the ASSA Twin. They are an absolute thing of beauty. And the pins, both the key pins and the top pins, are very slightly crowned with a flat bit in the middle there. I've exaggerated that a little bit, and what that does, that makes that lock as smooth as silk. The tolerances on the ASSA alloy stuff, particularly the ASSA Twin stuff, the high security stuff with the steel pins, absolutely phenomenal, okay, just incredible. And the Lockwood stuff over here, they fall into kind of halfway between these two things, all right? So the Lockwoods are designed to be used in very, very harsh conditions. So Australia is a nasty place. It has nasty wildlife. It's a desert, you know, and the Lockwood locks are designed to be used in the outback, so you know, really, really, really harsh environments for literally 30 years with no maintenance whatsoever. Now, what that means is that there's going to be an awful lot of wear in the lock and an awful lot of foreign bodies getting in the lock, so lots of dirt and grime and dust and all kinds of stuff. And so what Lockwood did to make their locks more reliable was they beveled their drivers and they beveled their key pins so that you could get a fair amount of wear in here and a fair amount of dirt and rubbish in here, and the lock would still operate. It might have been a little bit clicky or a little bit crunchy, but the lock would still work, and so they would be far, far more reliable than something with much cheaper pins. Now, I'm sure that Lockwood would have liked to have made all their pins like this, because that'd be dirt cheap, you know, you just get a bit of brass rod, chop the end off it, and there you go. But instead what they did was they beveled them. Now, what that means for picking, and here we come, guys, here's where it gets really important. What this means for picking is that it is very, very difficult to get these pins to the shear line first time. In fact, you virtually never do. So if the shear line is here, if you'd really like it to be there, right whack between those two pins, then you're going to be a little bit disappointed, because almost always what happens is that when you get your first click, you will be on one of these edges here. Now, it's very, very easy to overset these pins, okay? Incredibly easy to overset these things. So what tends to happen is that if here's the shear line here, the first click you get, you'll be kind of here somewhere. You might get a second, you might get a third, you might even get a fourth, who knows, before you're on the actual shear line. And by that time, you've had so many of these damn clicks that it's very easy indeed to just give it another little click. And once you've done that, you've overset it. And at that point, as I'm sure you guys know, there's no coming back. I mean, if you've overset it and the shear line is now grabbing here, then you are in a bit of trouble. And I use that word grabbing for a reason. All the pins are brass, and all the cores and the bodies are brass as well, with one or two exceptions. And that actually makes them very grabby indeed. So it's actually very difficult often to get a pin moving for a start. So when it's binding, when you know you've got a binding pin, it's often very easy, very hard to get that moving. It feels like it's set, you know. It needs such a lot of force to get it going. And then once you've actually got the pin set, it's very easy to make a mistake on that, go too far, have it jam and grab here, and then, like I said, at that point, you're stuffed as well, okay? So that is why these things are so difficult. And what I'll do later on in this video, guys, I haven't done it yet, but I'll strip a couple of these pins out of a couple of locks and show you what these pins look like, so that you can get a big close-up view and understand why these things do what they do. Okay, folks, well, here's what all the fuss is about. It doesn't look like much, does it? So here is the more modern pin, and you'll see that that is a spool. So there are 5 or 6 of these in each lock, no standard pins in there at all, and the little lip on those is absolutely tiny. So if we just zoom in there, and you can see what that looks like, hardly any lip to it at all, and there's hardly any bevel to the old ones either. So when you look at that, you don't really think too much of it. You could be forgiven for thinking that that would pick just like a standard pin, but this little tiny beveled area just at either end here, that's what makes these little beggars A, so reliable, and B, so hard to pick. Alright, well, we've talked about what the Lockwoods are. We've talked about the tools that you need to use them. We've talked about how to identify them. And we've talked about why these pins do what they do. There's really only a couple more things that we've got to do here, folks. We've got to talk about the feedback that you get from these pins when you pick them. And then what we've got to do is a worked example. So let's talk about the feedback next. What I just told you was that when you've got a binding pin, it very often feels set absolutely rock solid, and that is absolutely true. So when you're going through, let's say you're going through the first pass through the lock, so you have got moderate tension on there. Now there's a real, it's a myth, guys. There's a real myth that you need very heavy tension to pick a Lockwood. That's absolutely not true. You can't pick it with light tension though, okay? But you need moderate. Let's say moderate to high tension, okay? Somewhere in the middle there. So you're going through your first pass with your moderate tension, and you find your first binding pin, and you've got your short hook underneath it, and you're trying to get it moving. You will find it absolutely rock solid, and you'll actually need to back off the tension just a little bit to get it moving. Then what you'll find, you will not feel that pin set at all. Almost certainly what will happen is that you'll just move that pin up a little, and it'll just stop moving on you with absolutely no more feedback than that. You get virtually zero feedback through your tension tool until the moment that the lock opens. It's often a surprise when the lock opens. So with let's say these sort of pins here, right, real basic ones, when you set one of these, you get a massive click, and you feel it on your pick, you feel it on your tension wrench, you feel the core turn a little, you know you've set one of these things. Now when you get this to its first click, and you've got the shear line on here, you're going to feel the pin stop. You're going to feel maybe a tiny bit of feedback on your pick to tell you that you're there, but you are not going to get anything on your tension tool whatsoever. Nothing, not a damn thing. And then, folks, your job is to cycle through that pin stack again and again and again, finding little tiny movements of pins until such time as everything is lock solid. So what you're doing at that point is slowly edging these pins further down these little beveled bits towards the shear line. What will then happen is that all the feedback will stop and it'll feel like everything is absolutely lock solid. And at that point, you need to very carefully go through and do what I have long since called the Maenad Nudge. If you look back through my my videos, you'll see that I talk about a thing called the Maenad Nudge. At that point, what you're looking for is the last one or maybe two tiny little movements to the shear line here to get the thing set. Now, there are a couple of cheats, there are a couple of shortcuts, and I might show you those at the end of the video. It might make you laugh a little bit, but there are sometimes a couple of little dodges you can do. So what you're expecting, again, I'm going to go over it again, folks. You are expecting a binding pin to feel rock solid, and you're going to have to back off the tension a little to move it. You're going to feel it stop, but you're not going to get any feedback at all on your tension tool, and you're going to need to cycle through again and again and again to get the thing to click. So whereas with 5 of these pins, you're going to get 5 clicks and it's open. With this, you might have 20 clicks before you get it open, and at those last 1 or 2 clicks, you need to be very careful about not oversetting it. If you hear a whole lot of pins drop, if you give it one little nudge and you hear a whole lot of pins click down, then you know what you just did was overset the lock and you've got to start again. So let's go and pick one, guys. Let's do a work example and mount one up in the vise. So back in a second, guys. Okay, folks, well, let's get into this beautiful old brass padlock. This one is quite a special one, actually. You'll see that it's got a brass shackle as well. This was designed for an electrical environment, obviously. Now, I do have the key for this somewhere. The bitting is very tame by Lockwood standards. This one is one that we are in fact going to be able to pick just with the short hook, so we can get into this one just with the Tron. I'm not going to have to swap picks for this one. You can see that it works, and you'll actually see that you can turn the key either way, which is very handy, folks, because sometimes you just can't pick one of these clockwise. It's a nightmare. So you can actually go anti-clockwise. Okay, all right, so top of the keyway tension, big thick tension tool here, like I said, 125, thickest one I can get. Now, just to give you an idea of tension here, guys, the tension I've got on here at the moment is the sort of light tension that I'd use for a high security lock. You cannot pick this lock with that, it isn't going to work. On the other hand, that's massive tension, and that's not going to work either. Okay, I've got tension about there, kind of halfway between the two. Okay, so going from this little edge on the bottom right hand side here, Tron, first time every time, and what do we got? We got a little click on 1. 2 is binding, and I had to back off on the tension and lever it to get it to move. 3's doing the same thing, click on 3. 4's rock solid, click on 4. 5, click on 5 as well, so I've had a click out of every pin so far. 1, 2, nothing, 3 a click, 4, 5 a click, 1, nothing, 2, nothing, 3 a click, 4, nothing, 5 a click, 1, nothing, 2, nothing, 3 a click, 4, nothing, 5, nothing, 1, nothing, 2, okay, now did you hear that? Did you hear that little click? I just overset 2. You heard a pin drop, okay? You get that? You're going to have to start all over again. So let's do that, folks. I've just reset it. Medium tension again. Let's go. Click 1, click 2, click 3, click 4, nothing on 5, click 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing on 5, 1 again, 2 nothing this time, 3 nothing, that was just my pick slipping, 4 nothing, 5 a big click. See, absolutely no movement on the tension wrench though, eh? Any other lock you'd be seeing movements on the core, you'd be seeing this, you'd be getting feedback through your thumb. With this thing, absolutely not a damn thing. Okay, back to it. 1 nothing, 2 nothing, 3 a click, 4 a click, 5 a click. I'm lightening up on my pick pressure now because I don't want to overset anything. 1 nothing, 2 nothing, 3 nothing, 4 nothing, 5 a click, 1 a click, 2 nothing, 3 nothing, 4 nothing, 5 nothing, 1 nothing, 2 nothing, 3 nothing, 4 nothing, 5 nothing. Okay, we are almost there. Okay, and you heard me overset a whole lot of pins. And we're open. Okay, what I was doing there was the Maenad Nudge. So I went back and forward through that pin stack. Once I had that spot where we had almost everything set, and I actually overset something just slightly, okay, backed off on the tension, dropped back whatever it was that I'd overset, went through and did the nudge, and finally got whatever pin it was, some pin down the back, 3 or 4 maybe, and the thing opened. Okay, now I just want to do one more thing here, guys. I want to show you a filthy trick that UCOF in the UK figured out. Now this is again, it's a filthy trick, guys, but it works, eh? This is for when you've got everything set, you're within 1 click, but you just can't find it. So I'm just going to go through and pick this lock again and just get to the stage where we're just maybe 1 or 2 clicks from opening. So I'm going through and getting tiny. I'm having to back off on the tension here to set 5, or at least move 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we're stuck now. Excellent. Yeah, we are. Okay. Now, I'd actually never worked this one out myself. Okay, folks. But UCOF, John in the UK, discovered that at this point, if you give the lock a tap, 99% of the time it'll open. And it's open. And what you're doing there is just bouncing, excuse me, bouncing that last pin to the shear line. So there you go, folks. I really hope you enjoyed that, eh? And just to recap, you know, almost always the same keyway, almost always the same type of pins. And again, I'll see if I can put a picture of those up just at the end here. The pins have got the bevels. They do not set at the shear line first time. You have to edge the pins up towards the shear line. So for an ordinary 5-pin lock, you might need to get 20 clicks out of the thing, and then just very gently at the end nudge each pin, the Maenad nudge, to see if you can get the thing open. There are shortcuts, as there often are. You need big thick tension tools, top of the keyway tension only for this lock, and you need 25 thousandths picks. You need at the very least a short and a medium hook, and a short, a medium and a steep, like the Sparrow stuff, is preferable. So there you have it, folks. Thanks for staying with me for the best part of half an hour. I would love to hear your comments on these things. I really want you guys to be interactive. That's the whole point of the Lockpickers United videos. So please put your comments below. I will endeavour to answer every single one of them, folks. Let's hear what you think. Thanks for watching. My name's Michael Maynard. Mostly I'm with Gorilla Picking, but right at the moment I'm with Lockpickers United. Thanks, guys.